actually knocked off 8 Democratic incumbents. And probably the greatest irony of the night was I mentioned the number of Democrats who did not, people who voted for Obama and didn't turn up. Probably the largest group of, where there was the largest fall off in Obama voters who didn't turn up were among what group of people, you think? Young people, right. Among young people. They just didn't show up at this election, except in one place in Virginia. Right. I was down and I was talking to some reporters at the Republican victory celebration on Tuesday evening, and the party kind of staff people were watching these elections. We were watching this election between Shannon Valentine and Scott Garrett in Lynchburg. And all night long, Valentine was ahead 53-47, 53-47, 53-47. And I asked these staffers, I said, that election over? They said, no. They said, the Liberty precinct hasn't come in yet. And they said, we'll have to watch that. So the Liberty precinct came in last. And here was the vote of the Liberty precinct. Shannon Valentine, 324. Scott Garrett, 1,972. He beat her by 1,600 votes in one precinct. And if you saw what happened, that Liberty gave, had school off, provided buses, and the story in the Lynchburg paper that day is turnout is light. They said, except at Heritage Elementary, where every 2 or 3 minutes a bus pops up from Liberty University, dropping off students who went and voted for Scott Garrett and voted Sharon Valentine out. So the irony is the one place where young people continued to turn out in large numbers in this election wasn't a Democratic university, but it was a university that leaned toward the Republicans. So essentially, what we now have is that the House of delegates is now going to be in even firmer control of the Republicans for the redistricting. One other thing happened there is that in the House elections, a number of Democratic incumbents in Northern Virginia lost there. And 2 Democratic incumbents apparently in Virginia Beach lost as well. And so that's why Glenn Nye, I think, is very, very concerned in that area. One other point I want to make on that. Overall, regardless of what you think of parties, it may not be a terrible thing for Virginia that the most populous region of the state now has a 2-party system rather than a 1-party system, where Northern Virginia now have Republicans in that area as well, because that could lead to a different kind of Republican Party also there. But so that's where we are there. Finally, let me just talk about some of the implications of this for local officials, and along the lines of what Mike was saying before. You're now facing an extraordinary time, because from all that I can see, all the projections are saying now that the state government won't have as much revenue as it had in 2008 until 2012 or 2013. So you're involved in making these incredibly tough decisions. You're involved far more than the Assembly in making the decisions that people feel. They're going to see that, they're going to feel them, and they're going to know that you're going to make them. So I have just a little bit of political advice rather than economic advice, both for the staff, the administrators, and the elected officials. The first, in this kind of situation, it's incredibly important that you have a communication strategy to be speaking to your citizens, so that they know and they get clear presentations of what those choices are that you're going to have to make. Because my sense is that the citizens are far better off when they hear the choices than when they think that things are being done somewhere else and they don't have any involvement or they don't have any engagement. So I think the first thing is really to make sure that everybody has a clear communication strategy that puts those choices out. The second strategy, I think, is really to think about your opinion leaders in your community and make sure you take a real special effort to communicate with them. And in different communities, they may be different people, but there may be the business groups, they may be broader coalition groups that are there. But I think it's very important, particularly for elected officials, to make sure you're in front of those groups with the choices that you're going to be facing, because they're the people who are going to be talking to your electors. They're the people who are going to be discussing the issues in their businesses, in their schools, in their communities. So I think it's very important to have a communication strategy that deals with the opinion leaders as well. Finally, I think that, as Mike noted, the big issue and the big dollars are going to be, and the big choices are in education. And there, I think it becomes critically important to try to do your best to find a way to ensure that the public sees a board of supervisors and a school board that seem to be working together, not at loggerheads. Often the difficulties come the other way in some ways, where the school board now likes to blame the supervisors for what's happening to education. My sense is that in the long run, that does no one any good. And that it's probably critically important in the next couple of months, in almost every place where it's possible, to find ways of talking with the school board to try to ensure that everybody in the community sees school boards and supervisors working to solve problems the best they can and dealing with these issues and not standing there pointing fingers at one another. Because at the end of the day, when people get annoyed and agitated at political leaders, they often don't differentiate between who's right and who's wrong or whatever. They just say, we don't like them all on that front. So my sense is that this is a period where not only do you have tough economic choices, but those are going to be done best if you think about the communication and political strategies that you need to work well with them. Because if you don't, then you get, I think, the chance of having a public more annoyed, more agitated than it might be. At the end of the day, I like to believe that people are rational and reasonable. They understand these choices in their own families. They understand the choices you're going to have to make. And so long as you explain them to them in a reasonable, rational way, and explain them over and over again, is what you have to do. That you can't just say, we held one meeting. They have to be explained from a variety of perspectives in a number of ways. That's going to be helpful in trying to make sure that you generate citizen trust in a time where it's really easy to lose this, as you're seeing with some of the things happening at the national level. So thanks very much. I think we might have a couple of minutes. I'd be happy to take a question or two if we could do so.